A huge thank you to PT, who became a paying Patreon supporter this week. Thank you so much. Right now, global media is almost entirely controlled by the ultra-wealthy. You and I both know we're better off without a small group of billionaires shaping the news agenda and influencing public opinion, but that's what's going on. And that is where you can help. By supporting Over the Top Under the Radar, you help to fund independent left-wing media, not beholden to the whims of shareholders and billionaires. And this podcast only exists because people choose to pay for it every month. Right now, we only cover our basic production costs, and we need more Patreon supporters so you can continue to do this work and grow and do more. If another 100 people decided to join, we could do so much more with the show. Not only will your support help us to grow the podcast, but you'll also get access to some exclusive content. If you're enjoying my conversation with Kimberly, we're making a bonus, which will go out on Monday, and only Patreon supporters can hear it. Go to patreon.com/overthetop-under-the-radar. That's patreon.com/overthetop-under-the-radar. And thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. You are absolute heroes. I'm Carys.
And I'm Kimberly McIntosh.
We're on a mission to make sense of the news, asking why the media obsesses over some stories, completely ignores others. And why did the FT give Nick Clegg a column?
This is Over the Top, Under the Radar.
Our co-host this week is Kimberly McIntosh, a returning co-host. Kimberly's a writer and commentator on politics and pop culture, host of the upcoming Hot Girl Politics, and author of Black Girl No Magic. She's also a long-standing Windrush campaigner and policy researcher, and it was Windrush Day this week, so we're happy to have you back, Kimberly. Hello, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. It is very hot. I know it's cliche, but I am boiling.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a flat as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in a flat.
New build, old build, what's the
a bit of a mix.
Yeah, I would say that my main learning is I'm in a new build flat. If people are watching this on Spotify video or other platforms, you will see that I'm in a darkened room because the only way my living room, which is also my workspace, is bearable is if all the blinds are closed and the windows are shut. It's a very complicated arrangement. What's your setup? How are you surviving the heat wave?
So I've got a black owl blind. It's not an official blind. It's more like a black sheet stuck over my bedroom window. It's not aesthetic.
Okay, unofficial blind being just like a bit of fabric. Okay, fair.
Blocking out that heat. And then in the living room, I've put down all of the like rolly blinds, trying to block out the heat. And then I have a column fan, which I have turned off for this recording.
I've also turned my fan off for this recording, and I want people listening to know this is how much we are committed to high quality audio. Even our producer Sarah said that we could have the fans on, and we were like, no, we're pros. Turn those fans off, no disruptions. It does mean, I don't know if you've noticed, I used to work for a politician, and one of the things that we noticed when we're working together is that like if it's too hot, sometimes you get a bit grumpy. Do you get that?
I do.
Sometimes I'll be like, are you grumpy or is it just hot? And often it would be it's just hot. So I feel like this could be a rage fueled podcast. I don't know. So rein me in, Kimberly, if I get too aggy.
I'll see what I can do. But being hot and being tired, I think, are my two triggers. So let's see how we go.
And we're both, right? Who can sleep in this heat? It's a nightmare.
Impossible.
Okay. I mean, that's enough weather chat. We are in the UK. It feels obligatory. Kimberly and I have taken a look at the news agenda for the week, and we've each picked one story we think the media has gone over the top on, and one that's flown under the radar and not been talked about enough. And Kimberly, you are going to kick us off.
I am. So my over the top for this week is Andy Burnham. It is Andy Burnham. And it's not shade to Andy Burnham. I've just had enough about reading constantly about Andy Burnham, from the helicopter, following his train as it came into London, like on Sky News.
We've got, so for those who don't know about the helicopter, for anyone who's living under a rock or who has like one of those filters that means if someone like tweets about Andy Burnham, they don't see it. Andy Burnham is now the MP for Makerfield. He won a by-election on Friday a week ago. And he despite Keir Starmer coming out that same day being like, I'll fight anyone that challenges me, by Monday he'd folded like a cheap suit. Andy Burnham is effectively the next Prime Minister of the UK, right? Like, barring some miraculous act of God, Carys resigning, he's going to get the job. And you're right, everyone's lost their little minds. It was like he arrived at London Euston, and there was a helicopter following his moves. Tell me more.
So, and I was on holiday whilst this was unfolding, but I did see this. So there was a helicopter, definitely Sky News, but I think potentially BBC as well, that was following the train with Andy on as he arrived in London. And it did mean that some other news was then not covered in the same way. So there was a train crash that happened that weekend, which obviously did get coverage, but not as much as I think it would have otherwise. And then I know later we're going to talk about some other things that didn't get the coverage that maybe it deserved in mainstream media because of the fanfare and frenzy around Andy Burnham potentially and most likely becoming our next prime minister. But it's just dominated the entire mainstream news cycle for the past week, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go a little bit further and say even longer than the past week.
Tell me more.
Most of the by-election, so, Andy, obviously, formerly mayor of Manchester, as those who read the news will know, he tried to get into a by-election in February. He was blocked. Then after the local elections, all the electoral calculus changed. I would say there was a feeding frenzy around him from the local elections. Then as soon as Josh Simons, who was the MP for Makerfield, got rid of his seat, and Andy was like, I'm going to stand. I feel like this by-election was covered there was another by-election in Aberdeen the exact same time, which you probably wouldn't know about because all we talked about with Andy Burnham. And then I think the other thing I found really fascinating is how lobby journalists have for the last few weeks basically been treating Andy Burnham like he is the prime minister. So they've been like, well, Andy Burnham, what do you think about Thames Water? And Andy Burnham, what do you think about Iran? And Andy Burnham, it was like he hadn't actually won, and he did win pretty decisively. I'm going to talk about it in my over, but it wasn't. They've sort of been acting like he is the prime minister for I would say at least a month now, and it's weird, and it's also maybe not great journalism because the thing hasn't happened yet, so speculating about the thing feels a little bit odd to me. But I don't know what's been annoying you other than the fact that a man's journey from Euston to Westminster in a black cab warranted an overhead helicopter.
I think that for me, there's an element of not another one like that meme. I just feel and I don't even mean in the terms of we've had way too many prime ministers over the past decade, which is true, but more the coverage then becoming about internal Labour drama. It's just so much internal Labour drama, whether it's them briefing against each other. So at the moment, there's so much on whether it's going to be Ed Miliband being Chancellor, whether it's going to be Wes Streeting. And so much coverage is focused on people from either camp briefing journalists to kind of set out their stall or try and shift the decision that's going to be made about who's Chancellor. And not that that's not a really important role, but it's just really tiresome. I just don't want to hit. That's why I actually didn't want Labour to do a leadership election internally, even though normally I'd back a democratic process, because I actually I can't deal with it anymore.
You're I can't do a summer. I can't do a summer of hearing about West Street in camp. Yeah, no, I think there's an interesting thing happens here, and it is really unique to our political media, the lobby media, the people that sit in Parliament, all together and a press pack. I do feel obviously there are many brilliant lobby journalists who do some great investigative work, but at its worst, the Westminster lobby is a kind of series of gossip columnists or the kids in the playground that have the popcorn out and are fight, fight, fight. And I feel we've seen all of that. And, as someone who's worked in Westminster and for politicians, this thing about anonymous briefing is because it's anonymous, literally anyone can do it. And so sometimes it is a way that a politician gets something out. There were a spokesperson for Andy Burnham or someone close to Andy Burnham said actually he quite likes Shabana Mahmood's immigration policy, or the fiscal rules can stay. But then also it could just be someone freelancing, right? It could just be someone who kind of likes Andy Burnham or kind of likes Wes Streeting being well, I've heard. And the way that we know that that is true is that the anonymous briefing that has been tried several times over the last month or so has been Rachel Reeves might still be Chancellor. That is a great example. Someone from Rachel Reeves' team or someone who's from Rachel Reeves' gang keeps saying to journalists, I think Andy might just give her the job. And so then it's people are trying to spin reality, and the journalists aren't talking about reality. They're talking about what everyone in Westminster is talking about. And I agree, Kimberly. It's just exhausting. I don't want to hear it Because also none of it's happened.
No, it's kind of like political manifestation. They're like, they've got a vision board, but it's
You're
like
right.
instead of a vision board, they're briefing the Times anonymously.
I don't want to be the one to break it to Rachel Reese, but I think staying Chancellor that's on her vision board, take that off, babe. Take that down. It's not happening.
No.
It's not going to happen. My over the top for the week is Reform UK. So I want to be careful with my words here because there's a really specific thing happening in the media with Reform UK. I do not think media should not be talking about Reform UK, but I think that the coverage we get is not focused in the right way. And I think the recent by-election result in Makerfield, which we've just been talking about, is a great example of that. So Reform have now lost all but one of the parliamentary by-elections that have happened since 2024. So on the one hand, we have the storyline from the mainstream media that Reform are insurgent, they're doing so well in the polls, Farage is going to be the next prime minister, they have this unstoppable momentum, like everyone loves Reform. Obviously, they have had two strong sets of local election results, they've got lots of councillors, they did fairly well in Wales, they did all right in Scotland. So like no one's saying that isn't based on anything. But what I actually think we saw in this Makerfield by-election, which we were told was going to be close, lots of people were like, oh, can Andy Burnham win it? Every single Makerfield ward that was up for election in the council elections went Reform, wasn't even close. Presumably, Josh Simons, the MP that stood down, felt that potentially he wasn't going to win his seat next time. Might be one of the reasons he hands over to Andy Burnham, as well as, selflessness and patriotism. So we had this story going into the by-election that it was going to be really close. It wasn't close. Turnout was incredibly high. Andy Burnham had a 9,000 majority. And if you added up the votes for Reform and the votes for Restore UK, which was the even further right party formed by a former Reform MP, which is like, if you thought Reform was racism light, this is racism max, deport everyone. And, for context for people, if you were concerned about the Restore UK vote, Makerfield has historically had a not insignificant BNP vote. So I think we can say, it did go up from 2010, but there was already a, fairly organised group of racists. They voted for Restore. Even if you add up the Restore and the Reform UK votes, you still don't get close to Andy Burnham's vote. So maybe this means Andy Burnham is the Messiah, hence, helicopters following him. He definitely has a political appeal that no other politician in the UK has. He is the most popular politician in the UK. But what I actually think is, it is evidence of the fact the media has gone way over the top on Reform UK. If they can only win local council elections and they can't win Westminster elections, it suggests that what they actually are is a protest vote for a lot of people. A way of saying, I'm not happy with things. I want to signal my distress. But when the stakes are high and it's my actual MP, I don't actually want to vote for them. So number one, there's a real likelihood that we've kind of overestimated the salience and the strength of Reform support. Maybe it's soft support. Maybe those poll numbers don't actually hold up. Number two, one of the reasons presumably Reform lost this by-election was, yet again, they were unable to find a candidate that was not mired in scandal. Robert Kenyon, a plumber, after Reform were beaten by a plumber a few months ago, Hannah Spencer. Robert Kenyon was a plumber, working class, didn't go to uni, fairly plausible. They did a big campaign video of him and Farage. Had some pretty unsavory tweets, some of which were about Carol Vorderman. I'm not going to repeat them. They were gross and weird and definitely sexist. He also referred to himself as a sexist in his own social media posts. Reform have hired so many vetting officers. We know this because they post the job ads all the time. Reform run full-page ads in the Metro and other newspapers asking for candidates. And yet Reform still can't find a candidate that isn't Coco Bananas or mega sinister. So that's another problem that they have. And I think the final thing I want to say, and I really want to talk to you about this because I know you follow Reform and electoral politics really closely, is the media give Reform a lot of free coverage and a lot of free airtime, but they also have loads of money. So this is a party with a really famous party leader who literally was on I'm a Celebrity, more money than we've ever seen in British politics, a huge communications team, a huge vetting team, and they still can't win these elections. So maybe, just maybe, the media is hyping them up way too much. What do you think? Are you over Reform? Too much coverage?
Completely. I'm so over the coverage of Reform. And it was making me think about this research that the University of Cardiff did last year, where they did some analysis of BBC News coverage and ITV News coverage of Reform and the Lib Dems in particular, and found that not only was Reform disproportionately covered, but also the way that Farage particularly is filmed. So often he'll be filmed in a pub, for example, which gives him a kind of man of the people vibe.
Even though this man of the people got a £5 million gift from a random rich person based in another country.
Yeah, and which just seems to, I don't know if that's cutting through or not, by the way, the fact that he just got this rando huge gift from a rich person, if people seem to be bothered by that. I don't know. I mean, I personally am.
But again, how much press coverage has that had versus his like weird campaign stunts being in pubs?
Doing all of, being in pubs, being man of the people. And also they found that they don't question the policies as much as they do for other parties. So whereas other parties will get really hammered, as they should, and scrutinised on the policy positions they're putting forward, they're not doing the same for Reform. And Reform are also, brought in to kind of talk about the policies that we want to put in, whereas the Lib Dems, for example, are brought in to comment on Labour. So they're not being invited in the same way to talk about what they want to do for the country and what their vision is. So we know that there's this distortion. I know that the BBC is very defensive about this. I wrote a complaint, lots of people have, about the coverage of Reform. And in the reply that I got back, thank you, they were like, oh, it's because we're reflecting like public support for this party, I'm guessing here like polling that shows support for Reform. But it's also this disconnection. Like, do you not think that disproportionate coverage of Reform influences the support for Reform? And then you've just got this kind of vicious 100%. Cycle.
And it's like what the thing that the media has given Reform for, years now is legitimacy, being on BBC, being on the Today programme, and there's an obvious contrast with a party that has not had the same poll numbers, but has a similar number of MPs, which is the Green Party. No one bothered to go to the Green Party conference last year, whereas it was wall to wall. Every journalist was at Reform UK. And as you say, that's not reflecting the public mood, that's shaping the public mood. And what did we see the moment that the Green Party won a by-election earlier this year? Suddenly their poll numbers jumped because people were like, oh, they're a thing. And the media has been telling us Reform are a thing for like a couple of years now. And I think it's interesting that even with all of that media coverage and like all of the money they have so much money, like millions and millions of pounds, mostly from this one rando rich guy. They still haven't broken through electorally. So actually, maybe the media are telling us a story that isn't true.
Definitely. And you also get such a disproportionate amount of coverage on kind of the key figures like Farage and others. But I'm only seeing in local press or BBC coverage, but like kind of their local arm of the councillors. Like they've had so many councillors defect, either to the Tories or as independents. So many people are seeing what it actually means to be a Reform councillor in their local area. And then they're saying no because it's a mess. Like the local government Chronicle has been like interviewing people who have defected from Reform to the Tories. Some of them have defected from the Tories to Reform, them from Reform back to the Tories, because what they've seen is that in local government, Reform don't know how to govern. And they've been so appalled by it, they've gone back to the Conservative Party. So my under the radar for this week is Windrush Day. So you said at the beginning that I am a Windrush campaigner, and for some context, Windrush Day came into being in 2018 following the Windrush scandal. It had been being campaigned for much before that by an activist called Patrick Vernon, but
yes,
amazing man, love him.
Great people.
And now a Sir. So I should say Sir Patrick Vernon, actually. Congratulations to Patrick. Yeah, but he was campaigning for it for a long time, but the then Tory government in 2018 announced it following all the media coverage and campaigning on the Windrush scandal.
So the Windrush scandal, I mean, I think it became a byword for a lot of things, but the way I understand it is Theresa May introduced the hostile environment, and, people old enough to remember, there were like vans driving around telling people to go home. And there was a clear mandate for the Home Office, supported by the mainstream media of like, we need to get all these illegal immigrants out. We don't want immigrants in the UK. And there were a group of people, largely, but I think not only with Caribbean heritage, who for a mixture of reasons were then deported, put in very vulnerable positions in terms of their immigration status, because of paperwork mess ups by the Home Office. So a group of people who should have been able to be in the UK unmolested, legally, legitimately, suddenly found that like they didn't have immigration status. I mean, is that right? You're the policy expert. Is that the right way to understand it?
Yeah, so people weren't able to prove their right to live and work in the UK, as you said. And what this meant is that people were suddenly unable to work. So some people were fired from their jobs. Some people were unable to rent somewhere to live, so they became homeless. And some people lost homes that they had mortgages on as well. And this is because of the hostile environment. So suddenly you had to prove that right, which you didn't have to do before. And for this group of people, they were much less likely to have that proof and to have that documentation. And because of campaigners who had gone through this experience themselves and lots of different organizations campaigning together, it became a big media story in 2018. It was in a lot of the Black press, but also in The Guardian and Channel 4 as well. And it forced the then Tory government to have to bring in some restitution policies. So one of those was the Windrush scheme for documentation to help people to get their right to live in the UK, to enable people to prove their right to be in the country, which they always had, and it never should have been in question.
And I think that's it's a separate conversation, like the immigration system that we have, the immigration policies that we have, the Shaban Mahmood of it all, like put that to one side, like about 7, 8, kind of coming up for 10 years ago, a group of people who 100% had the right to be in the UK were set these ridiculous requirements to try and prove it. And I just think, imagine many people were born in the UK, many people came to the UK as children and suddenly were asked for documentation that they couldn't produce or didn't have. Some people were like flown to countries that they had never lived in, did not have a home in. And as you say, it got exposed, it got covered by the mainstream media. I think even at its kind of peak, even people like the Daily Mail were talking about it because the Windrush generation, who were a lot of the people caught up in the scandal, but not the only ones, were people who were literally invited to the UK. Like HMS Windrush, I grew up in Brixton, there's a Windrush Square. It commemorates a boat that came from the Caribbean with people who were invited to come and work in the UK after the Second World War, to be working in our NHS, to help to rebuild the economy. And so I think even the right-wing press saw that like any sense of like natural, actual justice was violated by people who were asked to come to the UK suddenly being told, well, you shouldn't be here. Get back to the country that you maybe don't remember or have any friends or family in. So it was like pretty awful and pretty shocking. And as you say, the Conservative government was forced to offer people recompense. But that's kind of where the story went out of the headlines. And I'd love you to explain like what's happened since, because there was this fund set up. The government was like, yeah, fair dues, we sort of messed that one up, we'll give you some money to say sorry. But what happened next?
So what happened next is they set up a scheme to help people prove that they had the right to be here. But then the following year, in 2019, they set up a compensation scheme so that people could apply to get compensation for, the loss of their job, the loss of their home, but also the impact on their life more broadly. And there's also a review that was commissioned that was delivered by Wendy Williams called the Windrush Lessons Learned Review, that was to look into Home Office culture and look into the causes of the scandal, why it happened, why it was allowed to happen. But the compensation scheme is one of the big things that campaigners want to talk about because it's not working very well and it hasn't been for a very long time. And about 56% of people who have applied to the compensation scheme have been offered £0.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Zero doesn't feel like an amount of compensation, but maybe my maths is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like compensation to me, £0.
Yeah.
So it's not working. It's not working. And over 60 people have died waiting for their payout. And the average payout is about £32,000, which, not to be sniffed at, of course, an annual salary is about that amount. But this is not commensurate, in my opinion, to being deported to a country you've not lived in since the age of 3 and missing the funeral of your mother. That's just not enough money to cover that. Or, no money would be enough, but it's not enough. So one person applied to the compensation scheme and they were initially offered £0 for everything that they went through. But then they got the support of a pro bono lawyer. So that's a lawyer that supports you for free, because at the moment the government don't fund legal representation for claims. And it's the only scandal of this kind, of this nature, that doesn't qualify for that. So infected blood. They have funded legal representation. The post office schemes, because of the post office scandal, they have it as well. And it's not to say that they have been treated well or that those schemes work well either. But Windrush really stands out as being the only one that doesn't have that in place. And I'll leave the audience to decide why they think that is. But I do want to say that a lot of those other campaigns have come out in solidarity with the Windrush campaign. So, you know, we're all in this together and fighting together. And not having legal support really, really affects people who are going through this process. So it's a really long application form. It's 44 pages long. And when you're applying, you have to document your experiences, what you went through, and that's very traumatic for people. They're going through some of the most traumatic periods of their life, but they also need to find documents from different departments to prove that they were here, and that's really hard to do without the support of a lawyer. And that's why the government really, really, really needs to fund it. But you also see a massive difference in outcomes and the compensation people get offered. So one person applied on their own and they got offered £0. But then when they had the support of a pro bono lawyer who supported them free of charge, that went up to £295,000. So this is a huge increase.
Oh my gosh. So if that person hadn't, so this person applied, was told by the government, you're not entitled to a penny. Thank goodness, pro bono lawyer got in touch and was like, I'll help you. And they got £295,000. That is obscene.
Absolutely obscene. And the government knows this. There was a report that was amazing that was done by Justice and the University of Sussex, and they found that the average amount that someone got offered when they didn't have a lawyer and they did it on their own was about £11,000. But then when they got legal advice, that went up to £83,200. So it's really the disparity between doing it on your own and having the support of a legal expert. It makes such a big difference, but also supporting people emotionally through that process as well.
Yeah. And there's like a sidebar about, there's so much class stuff around like needing to have a lawyer or needing to have an accountant to navigate these kinds of systems. And that's not right. But I just think you've come on the show this week because it's Windrush Day. Unfortunately, Keir Starmer also resigned on Windrush Day, so got even less attention than usual. So it really did fly under the radar. But also because we wanted to talk about this issue and also encourage people to support the campaign for justice for victims of the Windrush scandal. And so we will put a link in the show notes. There's a 38 Degrees petition that you're sort of supporting. And really, whether it's Keir Starmer or Andy Burnham, whoever's the Prime Minister, this isn't good enough. And, we talk about two-tier systems. Why is it the scandal where pretty much everyone affected is Black, where suddenly there isn't money for lawyers or support? And I think that it's just such an important issue. It's wild that it's flown under the radar. It flew under the radar for so long. And I think if people listening are upset by it, please sign the petition, please support the campaign, please post about it on social media, because it's such an important issue. And there is a route to some justice for people. It is not the same as it can't, as you say, make up for missing your mum's funeral or, not being able to have a mortgage on your home. But it can actually, the amounts of money you're talking about can help people to sort of rebuild their lives. My under the radar is a gentleman called Nick Clegg. I think you'll probably be familiar with his work. He was the Deputy Prime Minister of the country for 5 years. He was the leader of the Liberal Democrats. He was the MP for Sheffield Hallam. And for many years, he worked at Facebook, which became Meta. So Nick Clegg wrote a comment piece in the FT this week. And I'm going to be really clear. I don't think you should read the comment piece. It's really bad. I'm so bad. I'm why did the FT run this? What does he have on them? It's an opinion piece, which is basically him talking about how great the coalition was, how terrible Labour is, and talking a lot about fairy tales that politicians tell. There's a few shots fired at Andy Burnham for talking about neoliberalism. It's weak sauce. He's not saying much. It's not very interesting. And so in one sense, I don't think it should have been picked up by any other media outlets. But I do think if the FT were going to write about Nick Clegg, or if any media outlet is going to write about Nick Clegg, there is something else that we should be talking about, which is the horrific grift that he has conducted since he left office. For those who don't know, he lost his seat as an MP in 2017. He was part of the coalition government where he did a ton of terrible things, who's complicit in austerity, which is like a massive shrinking of the state. If you believe Nick Clegg's account, it helped to grow the economy. I think most economists would disagree with that. And then he did what many privately educated, incredibly wealthy men get to do. Nick Clegg went to Westminster School. I think his kind of family heritage is like European monarchy or like minor aristocracy. He was courted by Meta, then called Facebook. They just had the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And basically the consensus was he seemed like a nice, plausible European face that could try and deal with the regulators and all the problems Facebook had. So after messing up the country, he went to go and work at one of the companies messing up the world. And we don't know quite how much Nick Clegg made when he was doing that. Some people say his salary was like $2 million a year. What we do know is he sold some of his Facebook stock over the years he was working there. And conservative estimates say that he made $20 million just from selling the Facebook stock he got given. So Nick Clegg went to Facebook, got incredibly rich, like shilling for this terrible company, then turned up last year with a very bad book about big tech, which basically was like, you shouldn't be worried about big tech. It's all fine. Like numerous reviewers, including the FT, speculated about whether it was ghostwritten and like how clearly it was Facebook talking points. And now he's involved in this AI company that The Guardian exposed as being mega sketchy and kind of lying about what it was doing. I just like, I can't handle, and maybe it's the heat, Kimberly. Maybe the heat's making me angry. But these like mediocre men that mess up the country, get to fail upwards into some cushy corporate job, make so much money. And then like now he's apparently complicit in the next awful tech thing coming our way with AI. And then he gets to lecture us in the FT about politicians and fairy tales. Like he's telling fairy tales. And also, I want my money back. I feel like somehow that money's mine. He's like, used the fact I don't like him. I'm angry, I'm hot and sweaty. And I think we need to be scrutinizing people like Nick Clegg and Tony Blair rather than giving them a platform every time they rock up to sort of defend their record and lecture us all about the state spending too much money. This was one of his main points. And, we should all just get behind AI. And it's like, we'd all get behind AI if all these companies were paying us millions of pounds to shill for it. Anyway, Nick Clegg was under the radar for me because if we're going to talk about him, we need to talk about what a scammer he is.
Yeah, he's a big scammer. That article was terrible. It was very...
Yeah, you read it, right?
I read
so
it.
So bad.
The audacity...
Do not read it if you're listening to this or watching this. Do not read it. It's so bad.
So bad. Moralising austerity, apparently, is what Labour did. And with the growth thing, he was just like, oh, and then the economy started growing, and then Labour decided to be against austerity, and that we should have just kept on that path. And I'm like, if your living standards are going down, telling me that the economy has grown, like, why would I care? What does that mean to me? Like, working class people's salaries went down. Like, we all know that.
Also, we know the impacts that. We know the impacts of austerity. We know it hit the poorest in the country hardest. He wouldn't know that because he doesn't really know anything about poverty. He's incredibly wealthy and comes from privilege. But yeah, I mean, the rewriting of history on austerity was wild. Like, we can quantifiably say how much it cost people, and we can point to the people that died because of austerity policies. But in Nick Clegg's fairy tale, actually, the economy grew. And Labour were being hypocritical and austerity was great. He also says some weird stuff about the financial crash, almost suggesting it was Labour's fault. And it's like, babe, that was a global financial crisis. Hun, come on. Is he Delulu or is he actually just like not super smart? But it doesn't matter because he's like knows the right people. This is what I can't work out.
Because the article was ahistorical and made no sense. So if that is truly his belief system, then I think I'm leaning more towards that he fell upwards. He's not that good. But maybe that's not fair. I read some of the interviews with him about his terrible book in The Guardian last year. I mean, everybody was dragging him, being like, this book, this argument is inconsistent, it's not good. But apparently he was seen as bright early on when he was part of the Lib Dems and they saw him as a future leader. So he must have something going for him.
Yeah, but is this actually about the fact that we just have a bit of a love affair with posh boys? Because if you look at Tony Blair, Nick Clegg, David Cameron, Boris Johnson, they all go to these like elite private schools, Eton, Westminster, Fettes. I hate that. I know the schools they went to. Fuck my life. They go to these schools, so they get, and like one thing I will say from having met people who go to these schools is like people who've been to Eton, they're all very charming. So like the money's going towards charming lessons. I met one of Boris Johnson's many brothers, and I was very charmed by him, even though I was prepared to hate him. And so they learn to be charming. They like also network. They get like network to hell, right? Like they meet all these people. A lot of people say one of the reasons you send your kid to Eton is like for the networking. Then you go to Oxford or Cambridge. I think Nick Clegg went to Cambridge, and then like sure, Tony Blair and Nick Clegg decided they didn't want to be Tories. But they kind of are Tories, and they kind of were Tories. And maybe we should just get over these guys who like look good in a suit and have a sort of like posh public schoolboy charm. Like maybe that's the problem. We're assuming when they like sound like a little bit posh and they sort of gesture with their arms, maybe we are being bamboozled and actually what they're saying is nonsense.
Do you know what? I think you're onto something, because it also speaks to the general like deferential culture that we have in this country and just like being very into like bootlicking the upper classes. So
Downton Abbey syndrome.
Yeah,
I've just made that up. But yeah.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Has someone done research on that? I would love to see it. Like, do people respond better to people who speak in RP? Yeah.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, I do now want to go deep on it and wish I'd done so before the show. I'll bring it back as another week. But yeah, I kind of feel like, again, maybe what happens with like the Nick Cleggs and the Tony Blairs is they go off the boil, and at a certain point they're just surrounded by yes men and money. Like, you know, unsurprisingly, Nick Clegg attended one of Tony Blair's weird kind of like let's lobby politicians because the Ellisons give me all this money dinner. It was like letting tech industry figures meet whoever the relevant minister was at the time. So obviously they're in the same scene and circuit. And maybe you just ascend to a level of wealth. I'm sure neither of them consider themselves wealthy because they're friends with billionaires. But like maybe once you've made a cool $20 million from just selling your Facebook shares, like that's not even for your job. You just sell the shares every so often, you get $20 million. Maybe then you do just start to believe like tech is amazing, AI is perfect, I was the best deputy prime minister anyone has ever seen. And actually, I kind of think the reason the economy isn't growing and things aren't good is because people didn't carry on the austerity that I did with my friend David Cameron. Yeah, I think it's kind of a through line with the Nick Clegg stuff. Like we need to stop platforming these like mediocre men who have like done a lot of harm to the country and apparently got really rich doing it. And I think that is true of Nigel Farage, as it's true of Nick Clegg and Tony Blair, who, you know, there's always shots fired at Tony. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for coming on the show. Where can people find you and your work?
They can find me on Instagram at Kimmy_McIntosh. And that's MCINTOSH, the Scottish way. And on TikTok, Kimberly McIntosh 5. And also Hot Girl Politics _ on Instagram.
Okay, thank you so much for coming. We're going to link to the campaign in the show notes, and please come back. It was lovely to have you, maybe when it's a bit less sticky and sweaty. If you want to hear more of my conversation with Kimberly, you need to go to patreon.com/overthetop under the radar, and you can get to hear more of our chat.